I was thinking about this earlier. And there is something just deeply, fundamentally comforting about the laws of physics.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Like you hold an apple out in front of you, you let it go, and it falls every single time. It doesn't hesitate or suddenly decide to float upwards because it's having a bad day.
Or because it's trying to find itself.
Exactly. Gravity just happens. It's a clean, undeniable mechanism. But then you turn around and look at human beings.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, you look at our inner lives, our relationships, our sprawling global societies, and suddenly it feels like, it feels like we're operating in a reality where you drop that apple and it just turns into a flock of birds.
Right, or a thunderstorm. It feels completely chaotic.
Completely untethered from any underlying logic.
Yeah, and I mean, we really do operate under this bizarre collective delusion that human nature, so our emotions, our economic systems, politics, that all of that is somehow entirely exempt from the strict rules of cause and effect, the rules that govern literally the rest of the natural world.
We act like we have diplomatic immunity from physics.
We really do.
Well, welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today, we're taking you on a journey that forces us to confront that exact delusion. We are unpacking a really profound, incredibly thought-provoking essay by a writer named Sowing.
Published recently, right? In June 2024.
Yes, exactly. June 2024, and it's titled, You Reap What You Sow. And for those of you who might be unfamiliar, Sowing is a thinker who essentially blends ancient agricultural philosophy with modern geopolitical and psychological analysis.
Which is quite the combination.
It really is. And our mission today is to explore how this essay takes the absolute most basic, undeniable rule of dirt and farming and uses it as a mirror to expose the massive cognitive dissonance in how we live our lives.
And you know, the premise sounds almost deceptively simple at first. The author asks us to just look at the literal law of the field, the basic biological fact that for thousands of years, humanity has never once, not a single time, observed a phenomenon where planting a carrot seed yields a watermelon.
Right.
Never. If you plant wheat, you harvest wheat. The mechanism is absolute. The input guarantees the output. But where the essay immediately demands our attention, where it hooks you, is how it takes that biological absolute and maps it directly onto our internal emotional landscape.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is where it gets real.
Yeah, so the author poses a series of questions, like, if we plant hatred in our minds, why do we genuinely think we'll harvest love?
Oh, wow.
Or if we sow stinginess, how can we possibly expect to reap generosity?
Or anger yielding joy.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the essay forces you to look at the sheer absurdity of our own self-deception. Like, we would laugh at a farmer who planted corn and then acted totally shocked and betrayed when stalks of corn grew instead of apple trees.
We call him crazy.
Right. Yet we do this psychologically every single day. Expecting joy from a seed of anger is, well, it's like expecting to withdraw $1 million from a bank account you only ever deposited pennies into.
That's a great way to put it. But, okay, I do want to push back here for a second to challenge this one-to-one mapping. Because, I mean, is the human heart really as predictable as a corn stalk?
You're saying emotions are messier.
Yeah, emotions seem infinitely messier than basic botany. Like, take the concept of post-traumatic growth, right? People can experience profound abuse or trauma, meaning a seed of deep anger or pain was forcefully planted in their environment.
Right.
And yet they somehow use that to cultivate deep empathy, resilience, even joy later on. Doesn't that prove the human heart can actually, magically transform the harvest?
That is a really crucial distinction to make, but it actually reinforces the underlying mechanics of the author's argument if we look closely at how psychological growth actually works.
Wait, really? How so?
Oh, well, the trauma or the abuse was certainly the environment, right? It altered the soil.
Right.
And an initial seed of anger was inevitably planted by that trauma. That's undeniable. But the anger itself did not spontaneously mutate into joy.
I see what you're saying.
Right. To achieve post-traumatic growth, that individual had to actively intervene in their own mental garden. They had to consciously plant a completely new seed, like a seed of reflection or therapy, forgiveness, intentional empathy.
They had to get their hands dirty.
Exactly. They had to water that new seed relentlessly to allow it to outgrow the anger. Because if they had simply left the mental field alone, if they did nothing, that seed of trauma would have just grown into bitterness. The fundamental law that a specific seed yields a corresponding crop never actually broke. We just often confuse the soil with the seed itself.
Oh, man, that is a brilliant way to frame it. By introducing a new seed, Kind of reminds me of introducing an invasive species into an ecosystem.
Like kuzu.
Yes, exactly like kudzu. It starts small, you might not even notice it, but it has a biological imperative to spread, and eventually it just chokes out all the native plants.
Yeah.
A seed of resentment in a marriage works the exact same way. You can't just drop seeds of passive aggression into your relationship for 10 years and then feel victimized when you harvest a divorce instead of a golden anniversary.
Because the mechanism was running the entire time.
And never stop.
It never stops. The mechanism is completely blind to our wishes.
Yeah.
It only responds to our actions. And, this is where the essay shifts. It moves from an uncomfortable personal mirror to a deeply challenging societal diagnosis.
Yeah, this is where it scales up.
Because if we accept that this mechanism governs the individual mind, we then have to ask, well, what happens when you take 8 billion of these individual gardens and merge them into one massive overlapping ecosystem?
The aggregate effect.
Precisely. The concept of human society as a giant collective field.
And this is where the cognitive dissonance we were talking about scales up to just a massive existential level. The essay lists these specific seeds we collectively plant as a civilization. Things like selfishness, theft, robbery, dishonesty, breach of trust.
We design entire systems around them.
We really do. We build economic and social systems that basically incentivize infinite extraction and ruthless competition.
Yeah.
And the author points this out perfectly. We look around at the harvest and we're just shocked.
We expect selflessness and peace from seeds of robbery.
Right. Instead, we get a harvest of disease, hunger, turmoil, displacement, systemic misfortune. And we look at the sky and ask, why is the world so cruel? Why are we suffering?
It's incredible because we treat systemic suffering as if it is a random stroke of bad luck, like a spontaneous plague, rather than the mature, inevitable fruit of the very systems we cultivated.
Yeah.
Think about the mechanics of it. It's very easy to see how a culture that normalizes dishonesty will eventually harvest a society devoid of trust. That's a direct, visible line. But the author goes much further, including things like disease and hunger as the literal fruits of our own making.
Which is a really heavy claim to process.
Yeah.
I'll admit, when I first read that part, my instinct was to reject it. Like, are we really supposed to view a viral outbreak or a localized drought as a crop we intentionally planted?
It feels harsh.
It borders on victim blaming if you read it poorly.
It definitely could, but only if you view it at the micro level of an individual getting sick.
Okay.
The author is forcing us to adopt a macro level historical lens here. Let's look at hunger. Why is there systemic chronic hunger in a world that mathematically produces more than enough food to feed every single human being?
It's not lack of food.
No, it's not a failure of the soil. It's the harvest of prioritizing profit margins over distribution networks. It's the harvest of geopolitical posturing and systemic greed.
Yeah, wow.
And why do certain diseases become devastating global events? Often it's because of long-term environmental degradation that forces humans and wildlife into unnatural proximity.
Right, destroying habitat.
Exactly. Or it's because of staggering inequalities in healthcare infrastructure. These are not random acts of a cruel universe. They are the compounding dividends of choices made by human systems over generations.
So we're essentially eating the bitter, toxic fruit of our ancestors' terrible farming practices, while simultaneously just tossing more bad seeds over our shoulders for our kids to choke on.
Because the mechanism doesn't care about our intentions. It only cares about the math of the harvest.
Okay, so to understand why we keep repeating this cycle, why we just stubbornly keep planting weeds and expecting a harvest of roses, the author argues we have to look at the underlying philosophical soil of our modern culture. We have to look at human hubris.
And this might be the most fascinating pivot in the entire essay.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
The author scales up again. From the societal field, they pull back to view the entire universe as a field. And they examine the fundamental beliefs, the invisible seeds that drive human arrogance.
And the text lists these deeply ingrained, almost universally accepted beliefs, right?
Yeah, things like the idea that humans are the supreme, most intelligent beings in the universe, the belief that humans can conquer heaven or dominate nature, and crucially, the belief that my fate is controlled by me, not by heaven.
Okay, I really want to dig into this, because this concept is deeply unsettling to a modern audience. That specific seed, the belief that I control my own destiny, is literally the bedrock of contemporary culture.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the core message of every commencement speech, every startup manifesto, every self-improvement book published in the last century. We are conditioned to view radical self-determination as the ultimate virtue.
The highest good.
Right. So to be told that this mindset is actually a toxic seed that yields suffering, that feels like a direct attack on our agency. Why does the author frame self-determination as a negative?
Well, it requires a nuanced understanding of the difference between having agency within a system versus having the hubris to believe you can overpower the system itself.
Okay, walk me through that.
The author isn't advocating for, like, passive nihilism. They aren't saying you shouldn't make choices or try to improve your life. They're critiquing the illusion of control.
Yeah.
When you plant the seed of, I am the master of all things, I conquer my environment, you are planting a seed of constant, exhausting friction against the natural laws of the universe.
Oh, I see. It reminds me of the difference between sailing and rowing.
And that's a good analogy.
Right. Like a skilled sailor has agency. They study the wind, they read the currents, and they adjust their sails to harness the natural forces of the ocean.
Yeah.
They get to their destination, but only by respecting the supreme power of the environment they're in.
They work with the field, not against it.
Exactly. But the mindset the author is criticizing is like someone getting into a rowboat, ignoring the massive hurricane forming on the horizon, and deciding they're going to physically punch the ocean into submission through sheer willpower.
That captures the dynamic perfectly, because the ocean doesn't care how hard you row. If you fight the current of natural law, the inevitable harvest is stress, profound anxiety, ecological collapse, and eventual defeat.
You just burn out.
You do.
Mm.
True safety and freedom, according to this worldview, don't come from dominating the field. They come from humility.
Mhm.
They come from recognizing your exact proportion within the universal field and aligning your actions with its natural rhythms. The friction of arrogance is what burns us out, both individually and globally.
Okay, so to prove that this cosmic theory isn't just, an abstract philosophical exercise for us to debate in a classroom, the author then does something very ambitious.
They really do. They go for it.
They attempt to trace real-world fruits back to their original seeds. They ground this massive theory in the gritty reality of human history and current events. And the scale of the examples they use to demonstrate this law in action is just staggering.
The text provides a remarkably wide-ranging list. I mean, the author talks about chasing the origins of simple headache or a car accident, and then scales all the way up to tracing the root causes of a flooded village, the imprisonment of an individual, an exterminated family, and even the overthrowing of entire historical dynasties.
And the essay does not shy away from the present moment. The author explicitly brings in massive ongoing geopolitical events to hammer this point home, specifically referencing the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel-Palestine conflict.
Which are obviously incredibly sensitive topics.
Highly sensitive. And we need to be incredibly clear here for everyone listening. The author is using these devastating wars strictly as micro-examples of historical cause and effect. Neither the author in this text, nor we on this deep dive, are taking political sides.
Right. Absolutely not.
We are not assigning specific geopolitical blame to any party. The essay is looking at these incredibly complex, tragic conflicts from a 30,000-foot view and asserting a simple, sobering fact. A harvest of this magnitude does not spring up from nowhere overnight.
Exactly. The text views these massive conflicts as the inevitable mathematical result of generations of collective seeds finally coming to fruition.
Seeds that were planted long ago.
Yeah, seeds of historical division, of unresolved grievances, of fear, territorial ambition. When millions of those seeds are planted and watered over decades or even centuries, the eventual crop is tragedy.
But just practically speaking, how does someone even begin to trace a specific seed for a multi-generational geopolitical conflict? Or even something as seemingly random as a car accident?
It gets complicated.
It does.
Yeah.
I understand the theory, but doesn't the sheer mathematics of cause and effect become impossible to calculate? Like if I get a migraine today, is it because I planted a seed of anger at a colleague 3 weeks ago? Or is it because the atmospheric pressure dropped and I just didn't drink enough water?
Right. The causality seems too tangled to be useful.
Exactly. Doesn't the math break down?
That is a very fair critique of the limits of human perception. And what is fascinating is that Sowing actually anticipates this exact pushback within the text.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the author displays this moment of genuine humility, admitting, I may not have the ability to conduct such in-depth analysis. They openly acknowledge that mapping the exact forensic root system of a complex societal event is likely beyond the processing power of a single human mind.
So they admit they can't always do the math to prove the theory in real time.
Right. They acknowledge the limitation of our visibility, but, and this is key, they refuse to concede the principle.
Okay, explain that.
Think of it like looking at a massive ancient oak tree. You cannot possibly trace every single branch back down through the trunk to identify the exact acorn it sprouted from hundreds of years ago.
Sure, it's too complex.
The root system is buried deep underground, hopelessly tangled with the roots of 1,000 other plants. But even without that forensic visibility, you possess an absolute, unwavering certainty about one thing.
That the tree grew from a seed.
Exactly. That tree did not materialize out of thin air by magic. It grew from an acorn. The underlying mechanism that actions have inescapable compounding historical consequences never falters. Just because the root system of a war or a systemic collapse is too vast for us to map does not mean the law of the harvest has been suspended.
Wow. It requires a profound level of trust in the unseen mechanisms of reality. Which brings us to the final and I think the most philosophically intense portion of the essay.
The moral stakes?
Yes, the stakes. Because if this law of reaping and sowing is truly absolute, if the mechanism never ever stops running, it creates a terrifying but completely necessary moral boundary for human behavior.
And the author distills this into a brilliant philosophical paradox that really challenges the reader. They ask, if the principle of you reap what you sow does not hold true, why not do as you please?
Right. If there are no consequences, if the universe is just a giant slot machine that pays out randomly regardless of what coin you put in, then morality is a joke.
Exactly. Go wild.
Exploit whoever you want because the harvest is disconnected from the action.
But the author continues, if the principle of you reap what you sow does universally hold, would you dare to act as you please?
Would you dare? Man, so what does this all mean? That question completely reframes how we view our daily choices. Morality is no longer about trying to be a good person because society or a rule book told you to be.
It strips away the performative aspect of ethics.
Completely. It becomes an issue of brutal pragmatism.
Yeah.
Every single action, every word spoken in anger, every systemic policy enacted for short-term greed is a seed. And you, or your descendants, will eventually have to sit down and eat the fruit of it.
The essay conceptualizes this by creating a stark contrast between two states of existence. It describes the greatest creators field, which represents a reality where this law of causality holds perfectly true, where you reap exactly what you sow.
Right.
And it contrasts that with what it calls the devil's domain. The author describes the devil's domain as a place where the fundamental rules of reality break down, a place where you sow melons, reap beans, sow beans, reap melons.
It's a total collapse of causality. And, initially, my instinct was to think that a world where actions are disconnected from consequences might feel liberating.
Like a free-for-all.
Yeah, no rules, no karma.
Yeah.
But the more you actually visualize that reality, you realize it is the ultimate nightmare.
It really is.
If I spend my entire life treating people with kindness, building trust, and acting with integrity, and the universe randomly hands me a harvest of absolute isolation and cruelty just because the rules of the field are broken, that is terrifying. Having your actions tightly bound to their consequences is actually deeply comforting.
Because it implies that the universe is fundamentally fair.
Yes, fair and intelligible. A universe without reliable consequences is the true definition of hell.
And that is precisely the insight the author is driving toward. We shouldn't read the devil's domain as a literal supernatural location with pitchforks and fire.
Right, it's a metaphor.
It's a profound socio-political metaphor for the breakdown of natural law within a civilization. When we look at a society and see a state of chaos, when the powerful can sow systemic destruction but continuously harvest immense wealth, or when the vulnerable sow peace and hard work but only harvest violence and poverty, we are looking at a corrupted field.
Wow.
The author warns that when a civilization lives in this chaotic state where actions are divorced from consequences, that society is not far from misfortune, suffering, and hell. When the basic mechanisms of fairness are corrupted, ultimate systemic collapse is inevitable.
It acts as the ultimate warning light on the dashboard of humanity. When the rules of the field appear to stop working, when we tolerate a society that rewards the planting of poison, the civilization is essentially preparing to starve.
Exactly.
Well, we have covered an immense amount of philosophical and practical ground today. We started with the incredibly simple, undeniable logic of a farmer standing in a wheat field. We took that mechanism and waded into the messy, complicated ecosystem of the human mind, realizing that every thought is a seed that will eventually demand to be harvested.
We covered a lot.
We really did. We scaled up to look at our entire global economy and society as a single, terrifyingly interconnected crop. And we examine the ultimate hubris of believing we can fight the natural laws of causality without burning ourselves out in the process.
And through it all, the essay forces us to look in the mirror and acknowledge that our current global conflicts, our systemic societal pains, and even our deeply personal struggles are not random accidents of a cruel universe. They are the mature, inevitable harvests of seeds we have been planting and watering for generations.
It is a perspective shift that permanently alters how you view the news, how you view your relationships, and how you view your own daily habits. And the author doesn't let the reader off the hook as the essay closes. They speak directly to the audience. And we want to pass that exact urgent challenge along to you listening right now. The author asks, what have you sown in the past? What do you plan to sow in the future?
It's a call to immediate, radical self-awareness. But it also leaves us with a fascinating and somewhat daunting puzzle to solve as we look at the state of the world today.
Oh, what's that?
Well, if we truly internalize this premise that our past actions, both as individuals going about our daily lives and as a massive global society, have already planted vast fields of seeds that are currently taking root and growing right now, completely out of our control, what happens when we suddenly realize a bitter harvest is rushing toward us?
Right. What do you do when you wake up, look at your life or your society, and realize you planted 1,000 acres of toxic weeds a decade ago and they're just about to bloom?
Exactly. Do we just have to sit back, accept the mathematics of our past mistakes, and agonizingly chew our way through the painful crop we've grown? Or is it ever possible for an individual or a civilization to go out into the field and pull the weeds before they fully sprout?
Oh, I love that.
Does the universe, in all its strict causality, allow us a window of grace to intervene in our own harvest? Or is the law of the seed truly unbreakable the moment it hits the dirt?
That is the million-dollar question we all have to figure out for ourselves. Because if gravity takes hold the exact second you drop the apple, the only way to save it from shattering on the ground is to realize what you've done, dive, and catch it before it falls. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the mechanisms of the world around you, pay close attention to the garden you are cultivating, and we will catch you next time.